Greetings, everyone. My name is Angelica Baczynski, Executive Assistant to the President and Director of Special Projects here at HJI. Thank you very much for joining our program, which we are pleased to co-host with the Research Institute for the Integration of World Thought on the topic, Does Switzerland's Neutrality Have an Expiration Date? On behalf of our Dean of Student Life and Enrollment Management, Dean Student Boyd, I will add his contact details in the chat, as well as links to our programs of study. So if any of you are interested in learning more, you are welcome to follow the links or contact Dean Boyd directly, who would be happy to help you. So thank you so much for the opportunity today. I'd now like to warmly welcome Dr. Claude Perrotet, who is president of the Research Institute for the Integration of World Thought and adjunct professor of philosophy at HJI. You may also take a look at his bio in the chat box shortly. Welcome, Dr. Perrotet.
Welcome, everyone. I'm just disabled my chat. I'm very happy to greet you this afternoon to introduce a very special friend of mine, Maître Yves Niedecker, who will, I'm sure, give you a very interesting and thought-provoking presentation. Before that, just a few words on the Institute. You probably all know HJ International Graduate School for Peace and Public Leadership that organizes this, or co-organizes this event with the Research Institute for the Integration of World Thought. That institute was founded in 1999 by Reverend Samuel Moon, and integration means is another word for unification, but it has the implication is to bring together what is usually in a conflictual relationship into a non-conflictual but collaborative relationship on the level of thought. So this is like a piece work on the level of academia, bringing the different seemingly incompatible perspectives together. That's just in one sentence. And we have been working on this since 1999. And this is it's the first time actually that we make such a presentation, such a webinar together with HJI. And we are very thankful that HJI gives us the institutional support, like the invitations you received, mostly must have come from HJI, I believe, and so on. So we're very grateful. And the main person towards whom we are grateful, and I am grateful, is the president of HJI, Dr. Thomas Walsh. And I will now briefly read his bio. I will introduce him to you so that you know more about him. And a comment, these bios are usually a little long, so the feeling is, but however, when you know the person, there's so much more that you could say that they're also a little short. So I'll start. Dr. Thomas G. Walsh is the 7th president of HA International Graduate School for Peace and Public Leadership. A 1979 graduate of HGI, at that time UTS, Dr. Walsh went on to earn his PhD at Vanderbilt University's School of Religion, where he specialized in the study of religion and ethics. Since his graduation, Dr. Walsh has taught courses at a number of colleges and universities, as well as at HAI. Dr. Walsh has worked closely with UTS co-founders Reverend Samuel Moon and Dr. Hak Jahan Moon in the establishment and in the leadership of the Universal Peace Federation, UPF, where until recently he served as international chair. Dr. Walsh has edited more than 20 books and publications for the Universal Peace Federation, and he served as executive director of Dialogue and Alliance, an academic journal indexed by the American Theological Library Association. So Dr. Walsh is our host today, and Dr. Walsh, please join us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Perrotet. for your kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. It's the first time really for me to participate in the Research Institute for the Integration of World Thought that, as was mentioned, was founded by Reverend and Mrs. Moon back in 1999. So what's that, like 26 years ago, and has been convening academic conferences since that time. I know, of course, Dr. Ward and Dr. Perrotte for many years, and I also know some of the early pioneers, such as Reverend Hideo Oyamada and Dr. Professor Che, who was at the University of Bridgeport for many years. And as I understand it from talking to Dr. Ward and Dr. Perrotte, this institute, in its current name, emerged out of what we have known as the Unification Thought Institute. And it was recommended by our founder that for the United States as a kind of global center, that rather than focus exclusively on the unification thought as systematic worldview, philosophical worldview, to have a broader scope, and hence this concept of the integration of world thought. Reverend Miss Moon always had this deep aspiration to kind of bring things together, unify the sciences, bring together the sciences and the humanities, and bring together world thought in a more unified way. So it's very exciting. Those underlying principles and values are also very important to HJI. We're excited about many of the developments here at this institution. Of course, a couple of years ago, we changed the name from Unification Theological Seminary to HJ International Graduate School with a focus on peace and public leadership. We have a new master's program in peace studies that's been very exciting and very well received. We offer a Doctor of Ministry degree. We have a group of faculty who are engaged in research in a wide range of areas of interest and expertise, and our own ongoing webinar series. But this is a special occasion to work together with the World Institute on the Integration of World Thought. I should mention that the Institute is in special consultative status with the United Nations, so is actively engaged there, just a couple of blocks away from HJI's main campus. So I just want to welcome everyone, thank Dr. Perrotte as the president, and Dr. Ward as the past president and founding co-chair, and of course our speaker, the Honorable Yves Niedegger from Geneva. I saw a couple of my friends from Europe, but also the Heiner and Carolyn Hanschen, I think I saw briefly. I'm glad they're here with us also, and looking forward to the program. Thank you, Dr. Perrotte.
Very well. Thank you, Dr. Walsh, for this introduction and for remembering that indeed our institute is an NGO at the United Nations. And next, I will introduce our main speaker, who is Maître Yves Niedegger, or the Honorable Yves Niedegger, as we say it in English. And let me read a brief introduction to his accomplishments and current activities. Yves Niedegger is a Swiss attorney and legislator based in Geneva. He earned a Master of Laws at the University of Geneva. After serving as deputy president of Geneva's Labor Law Court, he began a career as an independent lawyer, founding his own firm in 2001. A member of Switzerland's parliament, the National Council, from 2007 to 2023, Yves Niedecker was president of the Legal Affairs Committee and sat on the Judicial Committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Delegation for Francophonie, and the delegation responsible for relations with the French Parliament. A member of the Geneva State Parliament, Grand Conseil, from 2005 to 2009, and again since 2023, he is currently serving as the president of the State Control Committee, the Judicial Committee, and the Civil Rights Committee, and sat on the Finance Committee, the Legislative Committee, and the Human Rights Committee. Yves Niedecker has also served on several boards of directors, including the board of the Geneva International Airport. In his early years, he served as General Secretary or Secretary General for the Swiss branch of CAUSA, and was a contributor to various newspapers, including the Washington Times. So, Maître Niedecker, I am happy to give you the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Perrotet. So, the title is yours. Does Switzerland's neutrality have an expiration date? It's quite provocative, I like it. Not as provocative as does Switzerland have an expiration date, but not far from that, as you will see, I think, from my conclusion. So let me begin with a few words first about what neutrality is and what neutrality is not. To those who consider war as the worst evil of all, not participating in a war, I mean, restricting one's freedom to never participate in a war, except for self-defense on one's own territory, may appear as morally positive, at least pacifists would say so. And on the other hand, watching an aggression without running for help to the victim may appear as cowardness, which is morally negative. So I suggest that the moral approach of neutrality is not the proper one, even though many Swiss people would say it is. Neutrality is not a virtue, it's also not a shame, it's a foreign policy. And as every policy, public policy, one has to look at it from the point of view of effectiveness pragmatically. By the way, neutrality is probably the only foreign policy, if you want to avoid insignificance, which is available to a very small, tiny country with a population of 9 million, a territory of 16,000 square miles, 2/3 of it unfit for agriculture, no mineral resources, no access to the sea. That is no way to accede to colonized countries to get raw materials. So everything must be imported from outside, everything must be paid for, and export product can only be the result of educated human work, so manufactured good of high quality and services. So this is a situation in which you just cannot afford having enemies. So if we look at it from that point of view, a foreign policy with the foremost and probably most important duty of any government, which is to protect the life, the freedom, and the prosperity of its own people, it's probably positive. So some have judged Switzerland neutrality during World War II very severely from a moral perspective, but the fact is that there was no need to rebuild the country in 1945, and that there were, the Jewish population in Switzerland was 2.5 more in 1945 than in 1939, which of course cannot be said, whatever their respective grandeur, by no other European national policy that was followed during that period. I will say a few words on the law of war because this is the framework in which neutrality takes place. Historically, the law of war is based on the declaration of war, which has consequences, as well as the possibility to declare oneself neutral. That is, to not take part in when a conflict appears between two or more powers. Historically, again, states always had the absolute right to resort to war, and declaring oneself as neutral meant to relinquish to the right to resort to war in a specific context. There is a relationship between war and neutrality. It is of a reciprocal nature. The duty of the neutral state was to abstain, and for the belligerent, it was not attacking the neutral and tolerating the neutrals to trade and commerce with their enemies. This is not age old, but it developed through the Middle Ages step by step. And there was a codification of that principle of neutrality in 1907 through the Hague Convention. This convention has different parts. There's a part 3, a part 5, a part 8, but it doesn't really matter. So one part aims to ensure that hostilities are not initiated without due warning. This was the hope of a progress. All non-participating states were considered neutral, even if they know about the conflict. And the duty of the neutral state was not to supply, directly or indirectly, warship, ammunition, war material of any kind. If you would do so in favor of a belligerent, you would lose, it would be a violation of neutrality, and you would lose the status. Even if you would do so on equal basis. Before that convention, you could, as long as you would sell as much weapon to the German than to the French, you were still neutral. But from 1907, it was not anymore the case. And neutral state must not permit belligerent states to move troops or convoy or ammunition or whatever military supply across its territory. So it must defend its territory. It must allow belligerents to set up communication devices on its territory or allow the recruitment of combatants directly or indirectly on their territory. So neutral state must be impartial in every matter other than military. The neutral state should be fair and not partial for whatever they grant to parties in a war. That is, not to grant to one more than they would grant to the other. And belligerents in counterpart are bound to respect the sovereign rights of the neutral powers and to abstain to intrude into the territory. The territory of the neutral's power are inviolable, so says the condition. So to declare oneself as neutral is a lot of obligation. It's not easy to be maintained, and it's equally difficult to ensure that belligerents will respect the inviolability of neutral territories. If you look at World War II, which is not so far from us, for example, there were a lot of neutral powers in Europe. They took no official side in order to avoid being attacked. However, Portugal, Sweden, and Switzerland helped the Allies by supplying so-called voluntary brigades. So it were not officially soldiers, but they used the voluntary, quote-unquote, brigades to send to the United Kingdom, while Spain was doing the same in favor of the other side, the Axis. Ireland generally, also a neutral Ireland, generally favored the Allied side. United States remained officially neutral until December 8, 1941, the date when Japan attacked on Pearl Harbor after they changed their position. And several countries, even though neutral, suffered invasion. Nazi Germany invaded neutral Denmark and neutral Norway in 1940. Then Belgium, the Netherlands, the Luxembourg. The British invaded neutral Iceland. The Soviet Union invaded neutral Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. Yugoslavia was also invaded in 1941 through this war between Italy and Greece. And Iran was occupied by Britain and by the Soviet Union in 1941. So it's not enough to say one is neutral. It's kind of rough and tough to maintain that neutrality on one side and to avoid being invaded despite of your neutrality on the other side Fact is, only Switzerland remained uninvaded until 1945 because there was a usefulness to that situation, of course. So now I will say a few words about how to not have enemies. Claude, this is the next. Even if you have no personal enemies, it's still hard to have no enemies, because the enemies of my friends are my enemies, and the friends of my friends' enemies are my enemies too. So we live in a world where everybody can become your enemy indirectly, even if you have no personal enemy. And having allies is as dangerous, if not more, than having no allies in that situation. If you think of World War I and World War II, this conflict became world wars precisely because there was a system of alliance, and the power initially in conflict had allies who were committed to join the fights and to help them. And so the war became world war. So having allies is leading to war as much as having enemies. Additionally, if you hear some statement of American leaders, such as Mr. George W. Bush, saying, you are either with us or against us, where he said that when he launched the cruel and useless destruction of Iraq and some other nations in the Middle East under the banner of his anti-terrorist crusade, forcing the rest of the Western world to consider that a good thing and helping, otherwise they would be the personal enemies of the United States. Not to mention the wise statement, an honest statement of Mr. Henry Kissinger, admitting it may be dangerous to be America's enemy, but to be America's friend is fatal. Stupid European of today, following the disastrous United States policy over Ukraine, will meditate certainly a long time over the words of Mr. Kissinger. My next point is about how neutrality came about for Switzerland, because nothing really predestined the Swiss, next slide, Claude, please, to be neutral. There were fighters, very fearful fighters, a bit like the Afghan of today, most of their history. So today we have Switzerland, which is neutral. We have also Austria neutral, Ireland, Malta. This is for the Europe. And in the Balkan, we have also Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, who have also this position of neutral. How did it happen to Switzerland to be neutral? It's strictly and probably only because of the Alps. If you trace back to the Holy Roman Empire, imagine Germany in the north, Italy in the south, being part of this empire. The emperor was elected by the German princes in the north, but could not reign as an emperor until he was blessed or crowned by the Pope in Rome. So they had to cross the Alps. And some Swiss tribes on these Alps, in a specific place called the Gotthard Pass, were controlling a place where you have only one chain of mountain to cross. The rest of the Alps is 2 or 3 chains of high mountain to cross. So this place was strategically extremely important. And because of that, those who were occupying that place and making the passage possible, be it for business, there were trade fairs in north of Italy as well as in the south of Germany, but also the emperor, to be crowned by the Pope, had to cross the Alps and come back, if possible alive, before he could be in power. So this gave to these tribal groups of early Swiss in the Alps the possibility to claim a direct dominion from the empire. They were exfiltrated kind of from the Middle Age being a local lord fighting for larger territories against each other, with that protection from the very top of the empire they could maintain themselves away from those battles for power. And that's maybe the very beginning of this particular history. The more modern part came about after the Napoleonic War. The French had invaded part of Europe in this revolutionary war against the kingdoms all around. And when the French have been defeated in Russia, there was a conference in Vienna, 1815, where the big powers, the winners, decided what to do about the borders of Europe and what to plan for the future. And the Alps was, of course, the issue. If you look at the map, the Alps is a natural border for France, for Italy, for Germany, for Austria, for Slovenia. And everybody who has a bit of the Alps wants to be on the other side to look at what the enemies could be doing in approaching. And this position that the Swiss people were occupying, this early Swiss at that time, the state of Switzerland was not existing yet. It came about after the Vienna Treaty in 1815. These people were given the mission, kind of, to hold the territory and make sure nobody could be using it. Because if everybody desired the same thing, either you end up with a War of the Roses with Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner, with the house being totally demolished in the conflict, or you bring people to admit that they will not have what they want, but the other one will not have it either. So at this condition, Germany had a specific plan about the territory of Switzerland after the demise of Napoleon and the French. The French also, but they couldn't have a say because they were defeated. Italy had a plan too. Austria, the same. So the big powers, including Russia, who was part of the discussion there, wanted to find a solution by which everybody would stay at home and war would not start again. And the solution they found is to say, okay, Swiss guys, you will form a state for yourself in the Alps with the duty to be neutral and to be armed in such a degree that you will be able to make sure that no one is going to go through these Alps and attack the other. So that's the origin in modern international law, 1815, of both the Swiss neutrality and the very existence of Switzerland, because they created this confederation of cantons. There were 22. And later on, this canton, on the same model that the United States, formed a federal state and a federal constitution later in 1848. So this is how neutrality came about in modern law. And the question is always, if you are neutral and should not do war, what is a war? Until 1938, the Swiss were applying the sanctions dictated by the League of Nations. If you remember, Italy had crossed the Adriatic Sea on the other side. Germany was making problem, and there were sanctions. And the Swiss were following this sanction. They will be applying this sanction. In 1938, Hitler marched into Czechoslovakia on the ground of liberating the Sudet German, a minority there that was supposedly oppressed by the Czech. And at that very moment, 1938, the Swiss government had a reaction, which was a quite good reaction, I believe. They said that they would turn from the neutrality they had applied so far to a complete or integral neutrality. They would consider that economic sanction is a warfare. Economic sanction is basically you besiege a castle until the famine is inside and until the people give up. So it's an act of war to sanction economically, starve people, and make them do what you want them to do. So they decided they would consider that as an act of war, and they would stop to apply the sanction of the League of Nations. It was very clear at that time, because the sanction of the League of Nations against Italy had absolutely no result, that it was anyway no mean of bringing anything. By the way, some countries are under sanctions since 50 years today in our modern world, and it has brought any of the changes that was hoped to get through this sanction. So at that moment, the Swiss government reaffirmed neutrality, called it integral neutrality, refused sanction, and went through the war with the army at the border, but remained uninvaded until the end of the war, because trade was possible during that war. So that's the situation. Of course, Switzerland was criticized after that. When the World War II finished, the Cold War started, and the United States were quite critical towards the Swiss. And we had to invent a new type of neutrality. Claude, the next slide. The old neutrality that was for the sake of Germany, Italy, France, and Austria, so the neighbors of Switzerland, who happened at that time to be the big powers of their time, were all under US occupation. Austria was neutral. And so the neutrality of Switzerland for the sake of Europe was kind of passé. Something new needed to be invented. And the Swiss realized that the world was divided in Europe between Eastern and Western Europe. And they developed a diplomacy of neutrality that was East-West, of course, comfortably installed on the Western side, but theoretically neutral to both sides. At least the world believed it, and it worked pretty well. The International Geneva developed during all those years. And Geneva became a place of mediation, of diplomatic high venue from the whole world. If you recall, one of the main topics of those years was the so-called MAD, mutual assured destruction. Our youth had the hope to be sure that if somebody pushed the wrong button, everybody would die, which was very positive to know. And we had these talks about nuclear disarmament, such as START and SALT, and a few Pershing less on one side, a few SS-20 missile less on the other side. These were the things that were discussed in Geneva for all those years. And through this diplomatic dynamism, stability, neutrality, the Geneva became, and the Switzerland in general, a financial place for hosting banks and multinational companies having the headquarters there, trading, shipping, everything. Most of the prosperity that came to Switzerland is a reward to the stability provided by neutrality. Dozens of summits took place in Geneva. If you remember, the four great powers, 1955, all the way to Biden, Putin, 2021, going through Reagan, Gorbachev, 1985. This was the place to be for the diplomacy. The world order of those years needed a place like neutral Switzerland to exist. There was a usefulness to that existence for the world, and that's the reason why it was maintained so far. At the demise of the Soviet Union in 1991, this is the next slide, Claude, the raison d'être kind of Switzerland was kind of shaken because the world suddenly became different. Some jokes saying, well, the Swiss were a bit confused because they ceased to know whom to be neutral against, which is an ironical way to say that the Swiss was on the Western side, even though the whole world would admit that they are neutral. Same time, 1992, so demise of Soviet Union 91, 92, you have the Maastricht Treaty, which boosted the European political construction, with a very clear intention to absorb Switzerland. Swiss taking a lot of energy to resist to this absorption until today. But more important, the world order was shaken. It moved first to a form of globalism. It was the years of the illusions of Mr. Fukuyama, end of history. The Western world, the Western model had no more competitor. Everybody wanted to be democratic, liberal, and capitalist. It was just a matter of time until the world understands that we are, in the West, the only one with a model of universal values. Reality very soon appears as being rather Hutchinson shock of civilization reality. The Christian world ceased to believe in Christianity, and everything which was built on Protestantism, on Protestant Christianity, collapsed as well, and the Western world ceased to know what identity it had. At the same time, the BRICS developed through the exportation of factories and technology worldwide. We could see China, India, and many other countries emerging and creating a new world order. So the challenge was extremely high for Switzerland, because Switzerland is probably the product of a world order basically made in USA, to make it very simple, with a set of value which are the Western value, and the policeman of the world in a position to maintain peace by force if necessary, as the United States. How to invent a new neutrality that would be applicable and useful to a multipolar world, which is the world of today. And here, the Swiss government did not react as smartly as it did in 1938, changing the concept to adapt it to a new world. The Swiss got tired and felt more and more attracted to the European Union, which is only one pole of this multipolar world. The reason why Switzerland should not be part of the European Union is that if we want to maintain this role as a mediator between the big players of the world, we should not be part of one. We can be, of course, economically very close to our neighbors. This is impossible to do otherwise, but politically, Switzerland is useless the moment the country becomes part of one of the blocs that will have dispute over the last gallon of oil or the last gallon of clean water to be used on this planet, as they all want to grow at the same time. So if there is a need for a mediating place, this mediating place has to be neutral and cannot be part of the European Union. Unfortunately, the United States, the turning point is probably the war about Ukraine, where the United States played a little bit foolhardily the Ukrainian issue versus Russia, and imposed to all the allies sanction against Russia, and sanction if you would not follow the sanctions against Russia. And Switzerland weakly followed the European Union in that American war against Russia, and became part of sided clearly against that part of the world, which means ceased to be neutral. And from that moment on, this revealed probably the situation. Today, Russia doesn't consider Switzerland or Geneva as a place where you could meet in neutral grounds to discuss issues. If you look at diplomacy, it's the Middle East, it's Turkey, it's the Gulf, it is Saudi Arabia, but it's no longer Geneva. And unfortunately, Geneva has ceased to be the place for diplomatic place where things can happen, cease to be useful. And of course, nobody
just have a few minutes left.
That's fine. And of course, nobody can claim to be useful to the world. One can only be recognized as useful to the world. And today, the Swiss neutrality could have an expiration date. The title is perfectly correct. There is two ways. Either we follow this trend and there will be no more neutrality and probably a lot less of Switzerland, or the country recenter on its vocation, which I'm trying to do politically, but usually I'm in the minority in my country, and we reestablish a credibility as a neutral power and be a place where the world can meet again. But neutrality can no longer be the one of 1815, when it was just the neighboring European countries, neither the East-West European neutrality, because there is no more an East-West conflict. I mean, there is another one coming, but it's a bit differently shaped. It has to be a neutrality adapted to today's world, which will be a multipolar world with a lot of players and no single ruler, as it has been with the United States for a long time. Thank you for your attention. I'm ready for questions if you have some.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Maître Decker. I will stop the sharing. And I just wanted to, we will pass on now we will move to Dr. Ward, who will make some comments on what you just said. I just wanted to ask you one question, since you were not able, after this long historical overview, to speak too much about the current situation. I know from personal communications with you that you have been interested in the possible role that Geneva could still play with a number of international organizations related to the UN, such as the WHO, CIO, ILO, and a number of others in Geneva, and that you made a proposal to the state parliament. Could you just expand a little bit on that?
Well, actually, there is two. One is on a federal level, is to write in the Swiss constitution that the Swiss neutrality is an absolute neutrality, the kind of neutrality we had in 1938. That takes a popular vote that will take place in 2 years because we collect signature. And as you may know, the direct democracy here allows people to force the government to put an issue on the ballot and have people deciding whether or not they want something changed in the constitution. And the other one is on the local level. That has been accepted unanimously in the state parliament, which is a demand to the Geneva government to reevaluate completely the situation and not lose everything. Basically, there is nothing better than a world war to create a peace organization. That's what happened with World War I, League of Nations, World War II, United Nations. I'm not sure the United Nations is reformable. The veto system and all this is probably hard to reform. And whether it will be, or maybe another organization will follow, if so, the BRICS will play a very important role in the making of that new there will be a time where everybody will fight militarily to correct the borders they don't like. But at a certain point, the powers will want to freeze this border forever, like they always do. And they will need a world organization to guarantee that the borders are not going to move again. There will be no war again. But I doubt that the siege of this new organization will be in New York or even in Geneva. It might be in the Gulf or somewhere in the middle world between China and Europe. And my proposal was to tell the Geneva governments to look at organizations such as the WHO and others that are very technical, like intellectual property, meteorology, this kind of organization. They are so unpolitical that it is thinkable that they may remain in Geneva. because everything which has a political dimension is certainly going to be so deeply reformed in a different structure that they will not stay in Geneva.
Thank you very much. That's a fascinating discussion that I was totally unaware of until I discovered it through you. And the same is for the historical overview and the different reasons for neutrality. I believe at this point it is time for Dr. Ward to make some comments and perhaps also ask some questions related to what you just presented. So Dr. Ward, please. Dr. Ward, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Honorable Eve Niediger. We really appreciate you being here. And I want to really respect the fact that unlike someone like myself or a lot of us who are participating in this particular program, you're not just a person who's thinking about these things, but you have the potential, even if you are part of a minority party, of actually being an actor in terms of trying to affect genuine change in these areas. I concur with Dr. Perrotet. I really appreciated the fact that you walked us through the history of neutrality as it related to Switzerland, and the special. One of the things that strikes me a great deal is the fact that one thing that was very comforting, and which kind of seems ironic for some people, is the fact that embedded in Swiss neutrality is also the fact that Switzerland in and of itself is a very powerful military state. And somehow that's essential for it to be able to maintain its neutrality. And that's why it has been able to do many of the things that it's been able to do over these periods of years, because not only is it militarily strong, but actually the world wants it to be militarily strong in order to assure its ability to function effectively as a neutral state, as it has done so often in the past. Yeah, I want to raise a couple of questions at the end of my presentation, just some of your reflections on. I know there has been a lot of thinking, I think for some, probably 2.5 decades or so, concerning the propriety of Switzerland continuing as a neutral state. So I would really welcome your comments. You may have been in office when this white paper was developed, which specifically explored, some of the issues of, Switzerland's role as a neutral state, and the notion that some of the things that Switzerland did so well in the past, there are now international organizations in place that can be able to do some of those things, so that certain dimensions of the role that Switzerland has played so well in the past, maybe those roles have shifted because of the whole notion of multilateral institutions that are in place now, that somehow allow that some of those roles can be done through those mechanisms rather than just through the good offices of Switzerland, if you will. There are 3, I think, pretty prominent theories of international relations that I think play into the question of neutrality or not to opt for neutrality for a state such as Switzerland. One of those is realism, and I think that's the one that you primarily focused upon today. The focus of realism really is a nation wants to survive, and a nation has to make decisions which it makes. Even the option for neutrality, it should be based upon the fact that you want the nation to be able to continue and to survive. Then there is liberalism, which really emphasizes the notion of trade, the notion of multilateral institutions, the need for bilateral relations and multilateral relations that can be able to also drive towards a vision of a more unified world, if you will, than what we have today. And a third one is constructivism. And constructivism really emphasizes the idea that somehow, basically ideas, thought, ideology really lie behind the decisions that are made in terms of international relations and in terms of how a nation decides to articulate its foreign policy. So I'm just reminded of a historical parallel, which probably shows the value of the way that Switzerland has gone, for centuries, versus some of the ways that other countries are going that maybe are driven more by constructivism, more by ideas and ideologies than they are by realism. And I think you gave reference to the fact that Switzerland is on the border of several powerful countries, most notably France and also Prussia, Germany, if you will. These were major actors in terms of the whole European theater repeatedly in the 19th and also the 20th century. If we shift to another theater, if we shift to Latin America, you find that in Latin America you have several small countries, and one of those countries is Paraguay, which finds itself situated between Brazil and Argentina primarily, and in the 1860s, about the time of the American Civil War, there was a leader in Paraguay. His name was Francisco Solano Lopez. And he saw that basically the smaller Latin American countries were being pushed around by Brazil and Argentina. And so he tried to construct a different approach, if you will, in terms of how foreign policy should be pursued by the smaller states, wanting to find a way for them to kind of collaborate and work together vis-a-vis Brazil and Argentina. And when he made that decision, he actually got a certain amount of support from the president of Uruguay back there, whose name was Atanasio Aguirre. He also sympathized with this, and he was trying to spread this idea further, if you will. And then in 1864, Brazil attacked Uruguay. And when Brazil attacked Uruguay, Solano Lopez said, no, we can't let that happen. And so he decided to declare war on Brazil. Tiny Latin American country decided to declare war on Brazil. And as he tried to bring his very excellent armed forces to confront Brazil, he crossed into Argentina. And Argentina said to him, you can't do that. And he said, yes, I can. And so he declared war on Argentina as well. And then there was a change of the presidency in Uruguay. And President Aguirre, who supported his view, was no longer there. And you had a pro-Brazilian Uruguayan president. So suddenly, Solano Lopez found himself in a war. He was fighting against Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. And it was a war that went on for 6 years. And needless to say, at the end of that period of time, basically Paraguay lost almost everything. It lost 40% of its territory, and it lost as much territory as the whole state of Pennsylvania and the whole state of New Jersey combined. It lost a huge amount of territory. But even more serious than that, it also lost its population. The population diminished from 525,000, not a big population, but it diminished from 525,000 to 221,000. And out of those 221,000, only 28,000 were men. All of the men had been wiped out from the population. And anyway, so Solano Lopez himself died in the final battle. And when he died, he said, I die with my country. And what he really meant by that was that not only he was dying, but his country was dying with him. And I think that the problem was quite simply that he did not take a realist approach in terms of dealing with the situation. And the consequence of that is that Paraguay has faced so many problems in its history since that time because it opted not for neutrality when Brazil went into Uruguay, but instead it opted for something that was far beyond what it was potentially capable of being able to do. So basically, our world, as you note, has changed. And it's interesting because some of the countries that did opt for, European countries that did opt for neutrality in the mid part of the 20th century, including Finland, Sweden, and Austria. Those three countries have all joined the European Union, and now even Sweden and Finland have become a part of NATO. So the world has changed a great deal, and as you noted, Russia does not accept Switzerland's neutrality anymore because of the because of the position that it's taken vis-a-vis its involvement with Ukraine. So there is no country that has navigated neutrality more than Switzerland. And I would say one thing, I mean, Switzerland may not be the center that it was before, but I would just remind you that a few days ago, when it was time to try to work out the trade war between China and the United States, where did they go? They went to Switzerland. So I think that Switzerland still does have an important role, and it still serves as an important reference point. And I think that the conversations that are going on in Switzerland today are important conversations. And I just wanted to, I wanted to thank you for your very, very comprehensive presentation that kind of walked us through the process and really shared the rationale about why Switzerland made the decisions that it did, and why, in turn, because of that, I would say that Switzerland, on the one hand, does have a realist focus, but on the same hand, at the same time, it also has had kind of a liberal dimension to this as well, which has allowed it to play such a key role in terms of even the League of Nations itself, first of all, and beyond that, still being able to serve many times, although, as you rightly point out, not as much as before, as a venue where people come together in order to discuss these things. So I don't know if you can say anything about the white paper or about some of the discussions that you have had with your colleagues about the pros and the cons of continuing with neutrality. I thank you really very, very much, and I'm really grateful that we have a chance to have an actor with us today who's actually involved in this very important process. And I think the world still does look to Switzerland as a reference point and still as a champion of neutrality. Thank you very much, Honorable Yves Niedegger.
So, Maître Niedegger, if you want to respond briefly, we are a little bit over time. Let me just say two things concerning Yves Niedegger's. The party belongs to is actually the largest party in Switzerland. So it's not in a minority party, even though sometimes the others may gang up against it. And secondly, he has several times spoken about the BRICS. And I know for many of you it's obvious what that means, but for some not. So BRICS is a group of nations, Brazil, Russia, China, India, who are trying to come together more or less formally or informally as a counterweight to specifically the United States. So, Maître Niedegger?
To make it in a nutshell, I believe that Switzerland has benefited a lot from, I mean, it's an extremely privileged place to be, but only because it has been extremely useful, if not necessary, to a certain world order. The world order is changing, and we just cannot hope to have the same place in a different world than we had in the world which is already passé. I think the Western world had, I mean, if you look at Europe had 500 years basically of glory between 1492, when the Christianity was alone on the continent because the Muslim Caliphate was chased away from Spain, and the same year the discovery of the New World, the Americas. If India, they had also boats there, or China or the Ottoman Empire had discovered the New World, the world order would be definitely different. It so happened that it was the European who did that. And Europe probably closed this time of glory in 1992, which is very roundly 500 years, with this Treaty of Maastricht, which has been castrating the genius of each European nations in the profit of for the advantage of a blind administration in Brussels that is just full of it's some sort of deep state in the European sense, which is basically killing the spirit and the solidarity which existed before inside the nation. Now the nations have to have no more border and no more place to exercise a sort of national solidarity and some national unity. And it doesn't bring a larger unity on the European level. It brings only chaos. The leadership of this Western world is the United States of America, and basically most every values that has been propagandized, developed, and that was the base for the beneficiary base for wealth, for inventivity, for the freedom of the art, of science, democracy, and the rest, is applied Protestantism, if you want to look at it this way. Now, Max Weber used to say that the soul of capitalism the Protestantism was the soul of capitalism. What happens to capitalism if the soul dies, if people cease to believe in Christianity? And frankly, it is exactly what has happened. Capitalism became a matter of figure. Everything which is arithmetically, mathematically possible is being done. Everything which is scientifically possible is being done. There's no more soul. And the West has two choices. One is to admit the fact that we won't be anymore. We do not have universal values, which we thought we had. The rest of the world doesn't agree with that, and that's enough for us to have to admit it's not universal. And we can negotiate a nice place in the new world order only if we accept to go back to a reasonable portion of power. If we insist on ruling the world, we are going to disappear. And Switzerland, being a product of that particular Protestant world order, I could explain why, but just take it like I say as an hypothesis, it will not survive as a symptom of a world order if that world order collapses.
Okay. Thank you, Maître Dideker. This is a very interesting discussion. And of course, many of these points that you make and that the others make and will make, hopefully starting now, are debatable. Everybody has their own vision and feelings and opinions on these matters. And on top of that, we don't know, because everything that hasn't happened yet, by definition, hasn't happened yet, and could happen one way or another. And the wisest have been many times found to be wrong once the things actually do happen. I want to ask you a first question that, if I find it, that we have received on the part of the audience. And the person asking the question is David Pear. I read, has immigration affected Switzerland the way it has other European nations which steer the way you consider being neutral? Has immigration affected Switzerland the way it has other European nations which steer the way you consider being neutral?
The issue about we are affected in the same way as the European nation, because Switzerland, even though not a member of the European Union, has signed a treaty about the free movement of population. That is inside. Schengen is for the border control of person, but also the fact that you can establish yourself wherever you like as long as you have means to live, which is no longer the case in the rest of the European Union, but which remains so far in Switzerland. Not everybody, but if you can work, you can. So we have been affected by movement of population a lot more than our neighbors because we happen to speak the language of our neighbors. So salary is about 2 times or 3 times higher in Geneva than in France, and it's about the same for Italy, a little less difference with Germany. And the fact that German workers do not go to France or the other way around in so much number is because the obstacle of the language is important. But we have Italy speaking Italian, we speak Italian. We have French speaking France speaking French, we speak French. We have German and Austria speaking German, we speak German. So crossing the border for higher salary without the obstacle of language, of course, has caused, proportionally speaking, a lot more growth of population in Switzerland than in any other place, because we start with a very tiny population. We were 6 million not so long ago. Claude, when you were there, we are 9 million now. Yeah. And it's not because of births. The Swiss,
even though I left.
Even it's not that the Swiss are making babies, they do not anymore. It's strictly because of immigration. So now if you have a very specific culture, and we do, it's hard enough to transfer your values to your own kids, but forget it if you want to transfer your values to kids of others who just came yesterday. So we see a change in mentality, and certain things do not work. We have a tremendous trust. Here you can, Claude, you know, if you want to buy a newspaper, you go to a box and you put the money, you take the newspaper. Nobody check if you do, because everybody pays. That was the standard of Switzerland until not so long ago. No longer so today. We collect signature in order to provoke a vote on the constitution or on the law or whatever. We never had problem with that, but now we have groups from different countries who organize themselves and provide signatures that they get in very strange ways sometimes, and they influence the political system without having adopted the rules. So we suffer from that immigration, definitely. And also the moment we are not able to integrate people and have them love the values that we have as much as we do, neutrality cannot stand, because nobody in the world is neutral. Wherever you go in the world, voting is an ethnical issue. You go to the Balkan, everybody votes for their tribe. You go to Africa, everybody votes for their tribe, their family. The whole world is like this. We had a different system by which we considered ourselves citizens, and we made the state some sort of religion. Let us exaggerate a little bit. And our system works with a specific population. Of course, it cannot work, and neutrality including, with a different population that doesn't share the same history.
Okay, thank you very much. It reminds me of the United States, where there is this fear of replacement, you know, that especially the white majority still feels like it's being, is there such a feeling in Switzerland at this time that the original Swiss, so to speak, those who didn't immigrate in the last few years, feel that they're being pushed out, or is that not yet the case, or not?
No, there is already this feeling very strongly, but it is not expressed the same way like in France. France, for example, is a nation with one language, one dominant religion, and a unified state. Switzerland is a funny thing that was created in the 19th century, the time of the rise of nationalism everywhere, as a non-national state. You know, we have people speaking different languages, they have different religion. We never had the common king. we have just nothing in common except the will to stay together in order to be different from more different than us. So we do not feel the replacement as the French would, because we are not shocked by different languages, for example.
Okay. Yeah.
We might be shocked by different behaviors, because there's a Swiss behavior that is transcending every language, but we are not shocked by the differences as such. We are used to have small cantons and everybody speak their own thing. We agree that every village can vote on their thing. So the diversity is considered positively in Switzerland, in our model. But the moment this diversity is oppressed by some sort of invasion, kind of, then people will react. But they will not react the same way than the French or the German.
Thank you very much. We just had a sudden immigration or influx of questions. So I do have to ask you to be relatively short in answering them. I'll start with one by Laurent Ladouce, whom you know well. Victor Hugo suggested that Swiss neutrality may have a prophetic and eschatological meaning. Switzerland is not at all out of history. Rather, Victor Hugo suggested in history, Switzerland will have the last word. He added, it possesses one of the most perfect forms of government in the world. That's a statement. And then, in a sense, modern Switzerland maintains some of the ideals of the Holy Roman Empire, albeit on a small scale. Even more than the European Union, it has maintained the original spirit of the Holy Roman Empire. So actually, these are not questions. These are statements that I just submitted to you. If you have any comments, please do. Otherwise, I will move on to the next question.
Well, short comment. There was two views on the European construction. The one of Jean Monnet, who has the merits to exist and applied, that was considering that the European nation could only unite if they find some common threats, or some, in order to have this old European spirits very different from one another, giving up some particularities and admitting a power above themselves, they will need a big threat. Today, the Ukraine war is used for that. The European Union is basically close to collapse, and the governments of the European Union are wishing to continue that war because that's the only way for European Union to have some sort of goal and survive 10 more years. This is a pity, but this is that. But there was another vision, the one of Denis de Rougemont, who happens to be a Calvinist, the guy who was considering the political construction in a different way. To Calvin, individual is nothing because we have this double predestination. So we are double predestined from all eternity before the creation of the world to be what we are, including our salvation in eternal life. Okay. In that sense, the individual is nothing. At the same time, Protestantism and Calvinism in particular believe that an individual to whom God has given a particular vocation is everything, not because of himself, but because of the vocation carried by this individual, and can challenge government, can challenge anything. So the Swiss have integrated this spirit to a large degree. People look very humble in Switzerland, but in fact they are extremely stubborn. They all believe that in some way they have a vocation. In some way, God calls them to something very particular. You find this in New England with the Pilgrim Fathers and all this. It's the same spirit. And alike the WASP in America are going to be a tiny minority, the same thing in Switzerland is the same. Immigration is going to dissolve this kind of belief that individual can be at the same time humble and at the same time very proud of following a very individualistic and particular destiny.
Thank you very much. I'll go on with the next question by somebody called Peter May, or May. Neutral Switzerland is beginning to accept the agendas of the European Union, and some prefer joining the EU rather than maintaining its neutrality. This reflects the desire of a certain group of people. With regard to its ethical responsibility towards Europe, particularly the prevention of conflicts and wars, as well as the promotion of peace efforts between hostile nations through dialogue, the question arises whether Switzerland as a whole, and not just through representative human rights organizations, should act as a neutral moral indicator, and whether we can expect it to do so. Otherwise, this neutrality will not be highly valued by the international community, as it is always viewed as a haven of financial security for the purpose of enrichment. So moral neutrality, approved by others, or just selfish neutrality of getting everybody else's money?
Well, neutrality is a difficult thing. It's not necessarily easy. Most of the European nations in World War II, neutral, got invaded like the others. So it's not like a life insurance, I'm neutral and this is it. You have to offer something more than that. Now, the forces in Switzerland that want Switzerland to give up its sovereignty and become a province of the European Union, to make it short, they are the business, the liberal business shareholders. Our corruption in Europe is a bit different than in Africa. In Africa, you have to put a banknote put the banknote in the hand of the civil servant if you want anything. In Europe, we do it differently. The money goes from the taxpayers' pockets to the shareholders of the large company who have contract with the government. This is a large-scale corruption that we do have, and this is those milieux who wants the Swiss to be part of European Union, because basically it's not a political construction. It's a holding company of branches of European sub-companies belonging to an American group. And most of our government today, look at Macron and the others, they look like a CEO going from BlackRock to government and going back to UBS. They are not political. They are politicians, but they are not political leader. They are there for money mainly, and most of the leadership, educated leadership, is there for that. The reason why we are slightly different than the rest of Europe is that we have this direct democracy and everybody votes. And Switzerland happened to be the country of Europe where there is the least proportion of people who went to university, because we value all jobs and all type of things. And we also have the least unemployment rate. So, and the university over the last 20, 30 years is no longer a university. It used to be a place where creativity, individualism was stressed. You would be a doctor because you have found something new, which is very provocative, never thought of it, and you have to fight to have it recognized. That was university. Today, university is a school where you learn only one thing: how to obey two complicated orders. And the more time you spend in universities in Europe, the more you are a boring person and the more you obey easily. So we have a base of people who are not like this, because they are not educated by this type of false intellectuals, and they are more realistic, more pragmatic, more simple, more humble, but they vote.
Thank you very much. And the next question by Thomas Pistovsky. I apologize for the pronunciation. Do you think the future of the EU lies in some kind of federalism, or is the solution rather deeper political and economic integration?
But the model of Denis de Rougemont was the Swiss model. Individual states create a higher level of government bottom up. They give certain competencies to a higher government, which they keep control of. The same model of the United States, where the states remain the states. And some functions only are given to a federal government, and this federal government is supposed to be controlled by the Senate and by the people. But unfortunately, the model of Monet was applied, and in this model, there is no room for federalism. So if either it breaks and we have to rebuild something from scratch, it might be bottom up, but everything which is made top to bottom is going to fail and is not going to be reformable.
Thank you very much. I have still two comments that I will briefly read, and then I think we are getting close to the last possible time for us to conclude this meeting. By Philippe Soyvan. Neutrality in Switzerland is part of its security doctrine that has become part of its own culture. This is a country that is most prepared for any form of overtaking situation, especially military. So to say that Switzerland is no longer a country that seeks alliance still depends on the will to be an ally and come out as a military force against invaders beyond their borders. And by Laurent Ladoux, Switzerland is sometimes defined as the Willens Nation, nation, the nation of the will. This makes the Swiss identity so unique. Dr. Ward was right to talk about constructivism. If you have anything to add, otherwise, could you maybe make some final comments, Maître Niedecker? Any wish you wish to make or not?
Well, Switzerland cannot be a model because it's kind of a unique construction. It can be a symptom, and it can be a laboratory from which maybe somebody can learn something. And I believe the Western world is really on the verge of collapse. And there is things to learn quickly if we want to avoid losing everything. The Western world has to admit the fact that we thought we were the boss and we are not. And either we admit that and find a proper place in the new world order and live on, or we stubbornly continue to claim that the world must follow us and we will perish.
Thank you very much. So this actually concludes the substance of the program. I will pass on the floor back to Angelika Wyszynski, who will conclude the meeting for us.
Thank you, Dr. Perrotet, and thank you, Honorable Niedecker and Dr. Ward, for creating a very stimulating program for us today. And thank you to Dr. Walsh for taking the time to host this wonderful event. A recording of today's event will be available on our website early next week, as well as on our HJI YouTube channel, which I just put in the chat box. And once again, on behalf of our Dean of Student Life and Enrollment Management, I added links to our programs in the chat box, and you may contact Dean Boyd for any questions, and he'd be happy to help you. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. We are so appreciative of your interest in our programs and activities, and please be on the lookout for future events. Thank you so much.